Hey, Steve. John Martinez here. Good to see you again as always. For those of you who know Steve, you know he's a hearing aid sales expert. For those of you who don't know him, senior sales guru is kind of what he's dubbed, and he has been in the hearing aid industry a long time, selling and training salespeople to do the same. So, Steve, welcome. Happy to chat with you today.
John, thanks for having me today.
Yeah, so you know, I talk to a lot of sales trainers, salespeople, in a lot of different selling environments, and I think one thing that is really interesting about what you do, Steve, is you are in a space, you're in an environment where there's physicians, doctors, clinicians, people whose job it is to help people, and when it comes to
Hmm.
sales is a dirty word, right? No one wants to be that
Absolutely.
typical salesperson, manipulative or pushy, or no one wants to treat their patients like that. So, my question for you is, how do you marry those two things up? How do you marry that world of helping patients and the world of sales, and do they even belong together at all?
That is a great question. I'm so glad you brought that up. My view on it, whether you're an ENT, whether you're an audiologist, whether you're a hearing instrument specialist, your job is to help somebody. And in this business, in order for us to help somebody, we have to sell them. So in order to treat them, they have to be sold or they have to buy from us. And there's nothing wrong with sales as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, as long as it's moral, as long as it's ethical, and as long as you have the customer's best interest in mind. Well, one of the things that I talk to a lot of people about that have that clinical state of mind of, I'm there to just help the person. I don't want to sell anybody. Well, that's great, but if you don't sell them, did you really help them? Would be my question to them. So, yeah, I think that sales absolutely marries perfectly with helping people.
Yeah, it reminds me of a commercial that's been running lately that I think is just really funny. I can't remember what the commercial's for, but the premise is there's a person laid back in a dental chair, and the clinician is above this person and saying, this is really one of the worst cavities and dental situations I've ever seen. And then he or she, takes off the bib and just starts to leave. And the patient says, "Where are you going?" And the person says, "I'm just a dental monitor. I don't actually fix anything." And I think that's
Yes.
really the essence of what you're talking about is if you need to help people, you need to help people. And just pointing out a problem doesn't fix the problem. Um, I
Absolutely.
think that where that takes the conversation is, can you actually sell in a way that isn't pushy or manipulative, or that really is the same way a doctor treats patients, right? Is there a way to do it in a very nurturing way where you're on the same team? In other words, instead of having to have that stereotypical salesperson involved in the process.
No, absolutely. And I even further to that point, I think if somebody is pushy or manipulative, they're going to have returns, they're not going to have repeat customers, and their business ultimately is going to fail. As far as the way that I train it, the way that I do it is by asking the customer a lot of questions, having them involved in the sales process, and ultimately at the end of it, they just tell me to sell them, or they ask me to just treat them for their hearing loss and their lifestyle. I don't. I think I'm a horrible closer. I don't do it on a regular basis. I let the customer decide, and they're deciding the right way. Now, I guide them to the decision that they should be making anyway, but I certainly don't browbeat anybody.
Yeah, and that's a great point. You mentioned that it's more effective not to push or shove someone in a certain direction. And, I'm reminded of a study a company called Huthwaite did years ago where they studied, for 12 years, they studied, I think, 35,000 sales calls. And what they determined was the more times somebody tried to close a prospect, the less likely they were to actually close them. So I think there's a tremendous amount of wisdom in what you say, not only from just your experience, but from a scientific and a perspective of actually seeing that in action. What are the real world results? And if you are pushy, not only does it make everyone uncomfortable, but it's not effective. So Brilliant insight, Steve. Thank you so much for sharing. I hope that helps out some people who watch the video.
Absolutely. And let me go one
Yeah,
step further. And you talk
absolutely.
about pushy salespeople. A lot of times when I'm with a customer and they're giving me all the buying signs that you should be getting, instead of getting happy ears, I kind of go negative on them. And what I mean by that is, well, are you sure that's what you want? And get them to reaffirm their decision, because you'll really understand their level of commitment to getting back to their lifestyle by kind of questioning them a little bit.
Absolutely
So
beautiful.
kind of pulling back a little bit.
Yeah.
If customer says, "Yeah, I think I want to go with that," typical response would be, "Oh, are you sure? I mean, you know, is it really that important to you?" And get them to reaffirm that, yeah, it is important to me to get back to the lifestyle I once had.
So I'm glad you brought that up, and it makes me. I have another question for you then. So if you do pull back a little bit, the first thing that popped into my head was, well, what if there is something holding them back? What if there's an objection? What if there's a concern they have? What if something like that comes out when you pull back?
Well, that's actually what I'm hoping for in that point. I want to find out this stuff on the front end. Do they have an objection to the money? Do they have an objection to a vanity problem, whether the hearing aid is going to be visible or not? Do they have an objection to just having something in their ear? I want to know this now so that we can address it way before they take delivery of this. I want to make sure that this is going to be the right fit for their budget, for their lifestyle, and for their hearing loss.
So what I'm hearing is you're pulling out those concerns on the front end instead of trying to close them and then seeing what pops up, if anything pops up at all.
Absolutely. I want to find out everything before they come back after 2 weeks for their follow-up visit saying, yeah, I'm just not going to wear these. Well,
Perfect.
then you know what?
What
All
good
of
is
our
it?
time was wasted at that point.
Yeah, and that's if they even end up buying it. Yeah, I would guess that if they have concerns and you don't address them, that might sometimes lead to no sales. Is that what you've seen in your experience?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah. So you're assuming that they buy the hearing aid and then come back 2 weeks later and won't wear it. I would assume that in some cases, the sale is never even made if there's some type of hidden or lingering objection. I would assume that if there's something they're concerned with that you fail to address, that they don't move forward with any type of sale at all. They just leave with some form of, I'll think about it or I'll get back to you. Is that what you see in your world?
Absolutely. If you're not pulling out all of their objections, right there in the office, you're going to get think it overs, even after you gave them permission to say no at the beginning. So yeah, uncovering all of their objections, I think, is of utmost importance.
Man, you have been absolutely fantastic. I've been in sales a long, long time, but this is, it's gold. It's absolutely phenomenal, actionable, and very useful information. So, Steve, as always, thanks for sharing.
No, thank you, John.